Okay, so just in terms of the agenda for today, just a welcome and a little bit of housekeeping to note, a little bit of information about prospect change. Then we're just going to do a little bit of an overview of PMO, the what, the why, and the where, because conscious that a lot of you are well versed in PMO, but some people who've joined today who may not be so familiar with the term. So we will cover off some of that definition. Then we're going to talk about building a PMO. Who's going to talk you through that. We are going to have a break, and then we'll continue a little bit more with building a PMO. And then we're going to tell you how we can help as Prospect Change. Obviously, take any questions from yourself, and then we'll close. Okay. So in terms of housekeeping, the webinar is of course recorded, so there's no need to take notes. So grab your coffee, sit back, and enjoy. The recording will be shared with everyone following the event, and we are very happy to share parts of or all of this presentation with anyone who requests it. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to raise your digital hand or post your question in the Q&A with Asha, and she'll monitor this. If you have any questions that might be deemed sensitive because you having challenges in your organisation and you want to share those and get some thoughts from ourselves that you wouldn't want to be included in the recording, then feel free to just ask those outside of the webinar. We will be having a break, as I've just mentioned, and that'll be midway through. So it gives you a chance to stretch your legs and grab another coffee. And can I just say, it's also really nice to be joined today by some of our associates. We have a growing associate network, and we meet a lot, and they're involved in a lot of what we do. So thank you for coming along today to our associates and supporting Prospect Change. If anyone who isn't part of our associate network would like to know more, please just give us a thumbs up in the chat or contact Asha, and we'll be in touch to talk you through what that looks like. Okay. So, oops, excuse me. So, without further ado, let's jump in. So, Prospect Change. As we've said, we were founded in 2022 by myself and Ruth, and there we are in front of our office in Bradford with Asha and Dev, who is at the moment in India, spending some time with his family in India, which is lovely. So I can't be here today. We're Bradford based, and we support organisations in the setup, coordination, oversight and delivery of projects, programmes and portfolios of change, known as Portfolio Management Office. And for the purpose of this session, it will be based on portfolio level, but we'll go into that shortly. Our mission is twofold. We support organisations in the delivery of projects and programmes, saving them time and money, and to put PMO on the education map, professionalising its value and ensuring it's recognised as a vital enabler for success. So that's Prospect Change, just kind of in a nutshell. The story is much longer than that. If you'd like to know more, please do get in touch. We're always really happy to talk about our journey. But that's Prospect Change. Things you need to know about us. We are passionate advocates for the transformative value that a PMO can bring to the world of change. We have been on the receiving end of change and PMO. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. We know what terrible looks like and feels like, but we also know what great looks like too. We are pragmatic, people-centric, and we're very, very determined. We believe that all organisations have a responsibility to bridge the gap between education and employment, and we're prepared to lead the way in playing our part for PMO. So welcome to those who have just joined. Thank you for coming along. Okay, so just as a little bit of an energizer for us all, I've just got a little bit of a game for us. Now, what's in an acronym?
Okay.
So we've all been involved in this PMO acronym for some time, myself probably for the last decade. But there's still a lot of work to do in terms of educating and increasing awareness of PMO and just how great it is and how much value it can offer. I worked in financial services in operations, managing operational teams for a good 10 years and had never heard of PMO, but I'd been on the receiving end of change. So the projects that were happening all around me and all the changes filtering down to my teams were coming from the floor above, and I didn't even realise it was there. But not long later, found myself in that very PMO and kind of found my calling and passion. So there's still a lot of work to do in PMO. So without further ado, what's in an acronym? We might all be aware of some of these acronyms, but if you know them, put your answers in the chat, see if you can guess them. Picnic. Who knows that one? One for the techies. Have we got any answers? You can feel free to come off mute as well if that works.
I have to reveal that one, I think, Jen.
Oh, have we got one?
No, let's reveal that one.
Oh, no, Matt is correct.
Oh,
Problem in chair. Not in computer. And I think that's definitely been my case before. I've been told that I am the problem in chair. I'm not very good with tech.
I've just seen somebody saying chat's not working for them. You feel free to use, Martin, Q&A. Chat can be a little bit not particularly reliable when you do it as a webinar. So if you can't get anything into a chat, pop it into the Q&A. We'll keep an eye on both of them.
Well done, Stuart. Absolutely. What you see is what you get. Blob? Anyone know this one? Yeah, everybody knows that one, don't they? What you see is what you get. Okay, big load of bureaucracy. Oh,
Ridiculous.
and I promise you I didn't make these up. Highest paid person's opinion. Fofo. Fear of. Finding out. TLA. We've got to all know that one, haven't we? Real acronym, of course. Okay. So those are ones that we hear. I'm sure that you all hear different ones in your working environment or have done before. We all get used to them. We all start to use them, don't we, despite not wanting to. Okay, so let's go into PMO. The what, the why, and the where. So what is PMO? PMO stands for Portfolio Management Office, Program Management Office, and Project Management Office. The P is interchangeable depending on the level of change, and at its highest level, enables, coordinates, and oversees the control delivery of change portfolios, programs, and projects. And as we all know, all organisations have a vision, and to achieve it, they must go on a journey of change. A PMO plays a crucial part in preparing and supporting the organisation on this journey. An analogy that we use a lot at Prospect Change is the analogy of an air traffic control tower. So the best way to describe PMO at its highest level for portfolio is as an air traffic control tower, because that, as you know, that oversees and coordinates multiple flights and terminals, just like a PMO oversees and coordinates multiple programs and projects, ensuring that they align with strategic goals and are executed efficiently. They also manage prioritisation, resource allocation, and they also monitor risks that are out there. Well, let's have a look at what a PMO is not. So we all know, though, those people that are well versed in PMO know that there are negative connotations out there for PMO. I think in terms of who's here today, you're either falling into PMO as a job and you love it, you absolutely love it, but you probably still can't explain what you do to your family members or your friends. You've probably been on the receiving end of PMO, and it's almost like Marmite, the Marmite of change. You either love PMO or hate it, or you've not heard of PMO much at all before. So I think that's probably what we've got here in terms of audience. But what I'm here to tell you is what a PMO is not. It's not bureaucratic. It's not restrictive. It's not costly. It's not controlling. And it certainly isn't the project police, as it's known. A lot of the time, it's a term that I've heard quite a lot, but we're certainly not there to police your projects. What we are, though, is insightful, offering data to inform decision making. We enable, we support, we are efficient, and we facilitate change. So we are enablers of change. And this is what we're trying to get across in our world, just the benefits of having a PMO. Get rid of those. So why do PMOs exist? PMOs exist to bring calm, clarity and confidence to chaotic change, in a nutshell. And they do this by aligning change initiatives with the organisation's vision. They do this by ensuring organisations invest in time and money into change initiatives that align to long-term goals and strategic priorities. By providing visibility and governance across projects and programmes. By standardising and optimising ways of working in projects and programmes. So driving that efficiency by establishing consistent practices and methodologies across projects and programmes. And by serving as a central source of knowledge, tools and training within your change environment. We do all this so that an organisation can achieve their strategic goals and realise their vision. And anybody who's been part of our previous webinar, we've talked about that golden thread of change, right from that vision, understanding what change needs to happen, converting them into programmes and projects, and having those projects and programmes overseen by PMO. So where's its place? To be successful and impactful PMO, they need sponsorship at the highest level. A lot of us know this, don't we? This ensures the voice of the PMO is heard and that they have a seat at the table. A PMO should therefore be placed where it can effectively influence decision making and ensure strategic alignment. So if you haven't got this currently, and this could be where you are facing challenges, and the reason why you're facing challenges because you need that voice at the highest level. We've worked in a lot of PMOs and with a lot of PMOs where the sponsorship is through the Chief Operating Officer, and it really does help, really does help. If they can see the value that a PMO can bring then they can relay it to their peers. And so the PMO may sit within the strategy or corporate planning department. It might be under the finance department because PMO are really close to budgets, to project budgets, and can really help in that aspect of project management and program management. And in the office of the CEO or CEO, again, it's really beneficial to be in that place. Or as a separate and centralised function. You know, we've got HR functions, haven't we? You know, we should have PMO functions if that's deemed to be the best place in an organisation. That's really important. So if there's no voice at the top and there's no seat at the table, then you are likely to experience struggles and challenges. Okay. Some success factors here. I won't talk through them all, but you know, it's all about executive support, like we just said, having that backing, aligning to that business strategy, ensuring that projects align to organisational goals to maximise value delivery, effective governance, consistent methodologies, skilled team, of course. Communication is absolutely key. Resource optimisation, benefits realisation. Now, this is a really important one. It often kind of gets left behind, but this is a really key part of the success of a PMO to help facilitate benefits realisation. Continuous improvement, and of course, accurate reporting and metrics. Okay. So Stuart, you've just said where is financing this? Sorry, do you want to come off mute and just what do you mean by that? Sorry.
Yes, I don't. In all of this, I don't see a finance one. So you've got risks, methodology, communication, metrics and reporting, but you said a couple of slides ago that finance was important, and I don't see that on one of your success factors.
Yeah, you'll see that come later. Sorry, Jen, I was going to say, Stuart, you'll see that come later. So it sits under, when we talk about methodologies, and in each of the stages, you'll see us talk quite a lot about finance at that point.
Okay, that's fine.
Good observation, though. Thank you.
Okay, and principles that underpin PMO. So PMOs, these kind of these portfolio management offices, you that look after your change landscape. They're called different things. You know, they can be strategy offices, they can be change management offices, it can be PMO. There's a lot of different names and terminology out there right now. But whatever you call it, as long as you have the right principles and you're following the right principles that underpin PMO, then you're setting yourself up for success. And we've noted these here. So enabling a PMO that enables strategic growth, delivers value and benefits, provides governance and accountability, effectively prioritises resource and people needs, communicates with transparency, manages and mitigates risk, and continuously improves themselves as well. So it's really important that a PMO continues to improve itself as well as supporting organisation. Okay, just going to stop there because we're going to move on to what we're really here for today. That was just a really quick introduction to PMO, the why it exists, what it does, and where it should sit in an organisation. We're going to move on to how we go about building a PMO now with Ruth. But before we do, are there any questions? No? Okay, great. Thank you. I'll hand over to you now, Liz.
Lovely, thank you, Jen. One of the biggest, before getting into building a PMO, one of the biggest challenges is creating that case for change. So if an organisation is in the really early days of implementing and bringing in a PMO, and psychology tells us this, from a social perspective, if we are not bought into and understand the need for change, then we're not going to make the change. We're not going to be invested in following through with that. And bringing in a PMO is a change. It's a project in its own right, and it's a significant change for organisations that should deliver value. But it takes time to embed, and therefore, if we're not bought into that, so we're just spending some time really understanding why we need a PMO. What is that case for change? I'm going to share the slides. Where are we? Building a PMO. Can we see these okay, Jen? Have they gone onto the right screen?
Yeah, it has.
Yeah. Okay, so to use our air traffic control analogy, this is our favourite analogy when it comes to PMO because it sums it up perfectly and everybody knows what air traffic control is. So when you're talking about PMO and the value it needs to bring, it's a really good analogy to use. So just think for a moment that you're on your way abroad. You're going off to Lanzarote for a couple of weeks to enjoy some winter sun. And you arrive at the airport and everything will be running smoothly. If there is a delay, you know what that delay is, and we know why that delay is happening, although it may not be communicated to us as passengers at the air traffic control point. They know why. There is a reason, and it's usually based around safety and to make sure the planes are taking off, landing, and remaining within airspace at the point that they should. If, however, you arrived at the airport and you found that the air traffic control centre was closed, I personally would not be getting on the aeroplane. And I can imagine many people wouldn't. And it wouldn't be very long before there was absolute chaos because aeroplanes wouldn't know which runway to be on. They wouldn't know what height at which to fly at. They wouldn't know when to land and where to land. And if they faced some turbulence which slowed them down or even some winds that speeded them up, what impact would that have on the flights before them and the flights after them? They wouldn't know because all they know is their one plane. What they don't know is every other plane that's in the air and on the ground around them. And that is what a PMO ultimately does. It's about understanding all of the projects happening within an organisation in order to achieve organisational growth or even sustain organisation, the operations within an organisation if it's about reactive change. So whenever you talk about PMO, try to think about the air traffic control analogy, and particularly when it comes to implementing a PMO, because using air traffic control is a really good way to tell the story of the PMO to those that don't necessarily need to know the detail, but do need to contribute or receive something from the PMO. And we talk about PMO being at 3 levels. And as Jen mentioned earlier, the PMO that we will be looking at today is Portfolio Management Office, because that is where true value is realised from a PMO. But ultimately, there are 3 levels. There is your Project Management Office. Think of that as an individual flight. How do we get this flight to take off, travel, and land in the way that it was planned? Take off at the right time, travel safely, and land in the destination at the right point and at the right time. Your Programme Management Office is taking your capability to the next level. That's saying we know how to do projects. How do we now do programmes? Because we know that programmes need to be managed differently to how projects are managed. So that is like a terminal. There are numerous flights all taking off, and they might all be travelling within the same country. So it might be your domestic terminal, for example. But when we talk about our Portfolio Management Office, that's when we're talking about an entire airport and airspace. So how does an air traffic control actually keep track of every single plane within that airport and then hand over to the relevant airspaces? Now, regardless of whether we're talking project, programme or portfolio, there is a people, process and ideally technology impact involved across all 3 of these. But we are going to be focusing on portfolio and bringing your project and program into it as well. I want you to just reflect for a moment, because it's important for you to be able to hear what we're talking about and apply it to your everyday life to understand where you are right now. There are typically, in the way that we share this with our customers, 5 levels of PMO capability. Level 1 being chaos. So that would be that there's no standards, no visibility. It feels like you're firefighting. Projects are happening, but you are relying predominantly on the skills and capability of whoever is delivering that particular project. So some of your projects will deliver amazingly well, others not so much. So there's no standards, there's no visibility, and actually it feels quite chaotic, particularly if you're at that decision-making level, board, executive, etc. It doesn't feel like you have true confidence in the change that's being delivered. Level 2 is you emerging. So there are some standards in place, but they're not consistently used, and you don't have the ability to ensure they are being consistently used. It might be because projects are happening across the organisation rather than in one place, so you're not keeping them central. Now, defined is getting good. This is where you have your standards in place for your projects and for your programs. But if you stay in defined for too long, all of those red descriptive words that Jen shared at the beginning around PMO being policing and controlling and hindering, that's where the reputation of PMO is defined as negative. Because if you stay in a tactical space, providing best practice for projects and providing best practice for programs, but not elevating them up a portfolio level so that you can clearly articulate how those projects and programs are connected to organisational change and therefore organisational growth, project managers and programme managers feel like they are aligning to a standard for no reason. And it feels very, very controlling for them. And that's where that negative connotation can come in about PMO if you stay in the defined stage for too long. Managed is when you're moving in, this is level 4, this is when you're really moving into that strategic space. So you have your air traffic control of change, you have your PMO portfolio level implemented, and you are connecting your projects and programs to change. Your change is connected to strategic growth. Your strategic growth is connected to a vision. Your change is moving the organisation forward. Project and programme managers know why they're aligned to a particular standard because they can see they're a piece in a wider jigsaw of change. Managed is a brilliant place to be at. And if you're happy in managed, there's no need to push yourself into level 5, which is optimised, unless there's a need for it, because the organisation is growing significantly more, or there's an executive decision to do so. Optimised, though, is fantastic. It's where you've got those efficiencies, you've got true automation, you've got fantastic technology that's enabling your PMO and helping you make some decisions. And that's when you've got PMOs really wanting to understand more about the AI space as they move more into the optimised space. But level 4, level 5, good places to be at. If anybody feels comfortable doing so, do you want to bob into the chat or the Q&A what level you think you're at currently? We'll leave you to do that. We won't go into detail of it. Now, PMO pitfalls. What not to do. We've seen this quite a lot. And one of the things we will often do is help customers when they end up in this space, because it's not uncommon. I'm going to tell you a bit of a story about PMO pitfalls, how to avoid these pitfalls, and then we're going to get into quite a bit of detail when it comes to building that PMO. Once upon a time, in a fast-growing company called Chaos Corp, the leadership team decided they needed a PMO in order to bring their ever-growing list of projects about. And excitement was high, but little did they know they were about to make every classic PMO mistake in the book. Number 1, not getting leadership buy-in. The PMO team spent weeks designing a complex governance structure, but they never engaged senior leadership. And when they finally presented their work, the CFO scoffed, the CEO yawned, and the CEO asked, what does this have to do with our business goals? The PMO lacked sponsorship and was dismissed as an unnecessary overhead. Determined to prove their worth, the PMO introduced layers of approvals, documents, and endless checklists. Project managers now spent more time filling out forms than delivering projects. Frustration spread like wildfire. Teams stopped engaging with the PMO altogether, seeing it as a blocker rather than an enabler. Finance had its own budgeting cycle, and the PMO had no say in how funds were allocated. Some projects were overfunded while others struggled for resource. The PMO had no visibility into real-time financials, leading to cost overruns and wasted investments. And with no clear prioritization criteria, projects were approved based on who shouted the loudest. Low-value, high-risk projects sailed through, while strategic, high-impact projects were delayed. Chaos Corp had too many initiatives running at once, stretching resources thin. And months later, leadership asked, what value has the PMO delivered? Silence filled the room. They had no data to show whether projects had achieved their intended benefits. No one could connect projects back to business strategy. The golden thread was missing. Without a proper reporting framework, the PMO relied on gut feeling and ad hoc updates. Leadership had no visibility into project progress, risk, or cost. PMO was ultimately shut down, dismissed as an ineffective function. The end. It's not the most uplifting of stories, but it is a very, very common scenario. And it's really unfortunate. If there are any PMO professionals on the call here today, and I know there are a few, you'll find that sort of story really disheartening, because we'll have all seen it, and yet we all know the value that a PMO brings when it's done right. So how do we avoid these pitfalls? This is your risk. So how are you going to avoid these risks before you get into actually building your PMO? Remember, building a PMO is a project. Get that leadership buy-in early and often, and don't progress until you have it. Ideally, you need an executive sponsor that's overseeing and championing the PMO. That's really, really important. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. Take that time to get that before you truly push forward with the PMO. And in order to help you with that, try to speak the language of the exec. So what's the topic of the language at the moment? Is it return on investment? Is it OKRs? Is it KPIs? How can you understand what your executive team are needing right now, and how the PMO can deliver what it is they need? And link that PMO to business strategy and objectives. You must eventually get to that portfolio management space, even if you do start a project and program. Be pragmatic about the governance that you use, and remember that governance should work for the project, not the other way around. It's bringing in agility, not bureaucracy. So the governance is there to support and give assurance and oversight. It's not there to control and restrict. Be very pragmatic about how the governance can be applied to each project, and whether you can take a different approach for your bigger projects versus your smaller projects. And where possible, bring in automation to your approvals and your reporting. Integration, really important. Make sure you align your portfolio planning and governance cycles with budget cycles and with other reporting cycles and governance cycles that exist in the organisation. Don't create a governance process that is separate and then expect other functions to fall into line with that. Try to find out what's working already in the organisation in terms of finance and governance, and integrate with it. Use a structured scoring model when it comes to prioritisation, so that you avoid whoever shouts the loudest gets their project over the line. How can you effectively prioritise projects? Because there will always be new projects coming into the portfolio. Understand how you will prioritise those, do it consistently, have an alignment to strategic objectives, and make sure you're delivering the most important projects and utilising your resources and your people in the right way to deliver the right change. Golden thread. Golden thread is what we talk about a lot at Prospect Change. It's really important. It's the how do you keep the original purpose of starting a project through until you deliver right at the end. So define the expected benefits for every single project before you start and be clear on what good looks like and have a standard capability for doing that. Make sure you measure your actual versus your planned outcomes post-implementation. So don't let a project just stop and it falls into the abyss. Within the PMO, take ownership and accountability for overseeing those benefits and the true purpose and the why until the point that they're realised and handing over to business as usual. Every change should be connected to strategy for that golden thread and reported throughout. And in terms of reporting, use visual dashboards that provide real-time insights, particularly for your leadership team. They won't have time to read detailed reports. What they want is visuals, ideally, so that they can focus in on anything that is falling off track. You must have a standard reporting process across all your projects and your programs so you can report up at that portfolio level. And make sure you are providing your leadership team and decision makers with the right information at the right time in line with your prioritization and your governance and reporting so that they're able to make the right decisions about change. Any questions at all at this point? I'm going to talk you through then the two most important steps to take in order to get your PMO stood up. The first, as I've touched on, and I can't stress this enough, is getting that leadership sponsorship. Make sure you have a voice at the decision-making table and that the value of the PMO is understood. It can take time to implement a PMO, and it can take even longer to see the value of a PMO because you only start to see the value of a PMO, one, when projects deliver successfully, or two, when projects start to go awry and you're able to pull them back and make some really good decisions about those projects. Who knows when that's going to happen? So realizing the actual value of the PMO can take some time. So as long as you've got that voice at the table and you're very transparent about when the value should be realized, then you're off to a really, really good start. And then the next is the minimum value product, the minimum value PMO. We are huge advocates for making change simple. And one of the biggest reasons that PMOs do fail is they're just too over the top, they're too bureaucratic. And you might actually find, if you already have a PMO, that when you look at some of our advice and we share some information with you over the next hour or so, that some of what we're advising you is to take things away. And that might be what your PMO needs, rather than adding, if you've already got a PMO at the moment and what it's doing is feeling like it's hindering and slowing down, the right decision might actually be to take away from it, not necessarily to add new processes or new meetings or new ways of working. And in terms of that 80-20 principle, which I'm sure we've heard of, 80% of the value comes from 20% of processes. So how can we create a PMO and a function that gives the value without overcomplicating bureaucracy? Now, what time are we on? I think, right, I've had a quick look in the break on questions in chat. Martin, who I think has had to jump off because of another meeting, but did mention, is air traffic control really the right acronym to use, and suggested that actually, because air traffic control doesn't define strategy. PMO is an enabler for strategy. You do have some PMOs that define it, but the majority of PMOs that we have seen and that I have worked in and that I advocate for interpret that strategy into change and then that change into projects and programs rather than defining the strategy themselves. PMO has the capability to put the measuring functionality in place for that strategy once it becomes the change in projects and programs rather than defining its strategy itself. But air traffic control is definitely the best analogy I have ever come across. And I do find that when anybody is new to PMO and I say, oh, it's like air traffic control, but for change, within a couple of minutes, they've got it. Whereas when I say, oh, yeah, I do a PMO, so it's like projects and programs, you know, things need to be different. And you're trying to explain, it's very hard. But if anybody has other acronyms that they have used in the past, please do share them. We love an acronym, we love a story. It really helps to bring things to life. So we'd be really eager to hear any other thoughts that people have in the way that they have described or understood PMO. And then let me just check. I think there was Martin also mentioned, does it need to be restrictive and controlling on some instances though? There, because there is an element of you are restrictive for a reason. But I think once a PMO is referred to as restrictive and controlling, you're on a slightly slippery slope to decline in terms of the reputation of the PMO. Yes, you need to restrict in the sense of you can't spend another £100,000 without going through some sort of change control. But it's all about how that is communicated and the personality and nature of the PMO. So I would still try to avoid those descriptive words when talking about how you bring your PMO in. The aim is not to be restrictive and controlling, albeit you may be in certain circumstances perceived as having to put forward that characteristic, but it shouldn't be the labelling characteristic of what the PMO is. So that it can be if it needs to be, but it isn't the first word people think of when they think of your PMO.
Stuart's made a few comments. I think he was referring to other analogies. Is that right, Stuart? You mentioned the 2012 programme Olympic Park.
Yeah. So I went to the 2012 Olympics. So the programme was the whole park, but a project was just one of the stadiums.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really is. It really does help to have an analogy in this. For so long, we've tried to find ways to explain PMO to people within the organisation, to friends and family and other people. And this is the one that we've stuck with because this is the one that people just get. We've done it in education, and it's great in education because of course we're trying to carve that map in education and to be able to explain PMO to students between 16 and 18-year-olds, 18 and 20-year-olds. The analogy of ATC really does work. So yeah, like we said, great to see and hear any other analogies that are out there, but this is the one that we're sticking with for now. It works.
Another one as well is we talk about a house, so it's very similar, Stuart, to that one around the Olympics. Like a house is a project, building a house is a project, building an entire estate is a programme, and the national strategy for implementing 100 estates across the UK would be a portfolio, because that would take probably, well, it's the reason the organisation exists, isn't it? It's 20 years, it's delivering a strategy and achieving a strategy. So that one taps quite nicely into an overall strategy as well. And again, one that is quite relatable because it brings in the domestic element, so people can relate to it that little bit more. Anything that you can do with any change really, but particularly within your PMO, to make it relatable and make it really come to life, we definitely recommend. Because people don't always want to ask the question of, well, what is a PMO? And we immediately fall into acronyms, don't we? So, yeah. Right, okay, the detail of what we're going through today. There are 7 steps that we're going to talk you through. I'll bring them all up, actually, so you can see them in their entirety. And again, I say this a lot, it's really important. Bringing in a new PMO or even enhancing an existing PMO is a project. It's a project because it's delivering change. And that change is to realise value. So you must deliver this as though it's a project in its own right. That's hard to do when you don't have PMO already and you don't have project capability already, but you're almost showcasing what good can look like. So we have a 4-model life cycle at Prospect Change, and we like to keep change simple. It's always at the core of what we do. It's making change simple. And so we try to use really relatable language. So our 4-step model or life cycle is understand, shape, deliver, and embed. Now, I will just caveat this with the fact that we are using here quite a traditional waterfall model and a waterfall methodology. What we don't have time to do today is bring in that agile piece. However, next month, we will be talking about the difference between agile PMOs and waterfall PMOs, and we've got a guest speaker to help us with that as well. But today is predominantly waterfall, so if at any point you think, well, how on earth do I bring my agile piece into it? We've not got the time to focus on that today, but that will come in next month. So understand the change, shape the change, deliver the change, embed the change. Understand, embed, start and end with your change at all points. So there's 7 steps in bringing in a PMO. We've got to define the business case for the PMO with clear scope and objectives. Then design the operating model for the PMO with principles, structure, roles, processes, templates. Agree tools and tech requirements, and then deliver the operating model with tools and technology, recruit, launch, and then move into embed of ongoing feedback and development. Now, what you can choose to do, and I will touch on this later, is do this as a phased approach. Or you can do it, what we've seen here is the big bang, but a phased approach would be do it for projects first, then move into programs, then move into portfolio. Or you can do the whole thing where you design everything, you launch everything all in one go. So this is the big bang approach, but I will touch on the phased approach later on. You'll see that underpinning all of this is communication and engagement, absolutely critical. You must communicate, you must engage. What you're doing here is creating an amazing function that is going to take the business forward, that is going to help the business achieve organizational growth and be able to react to change and problems and challenge in a really controlled way and with confidence. And you're also potentially bringing in some new career opportunities for people that are already working in the organization. So communicate and engage this. It's a really good news story. Let's get in the detail of the 7 steps. So 1, understand what's needed, understand the change, understand the need for a PMO. This is the creation of your business case. So building a PMO is a project. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? How are you going to do it? How are you going from vision, what and why, to your reality, which is your how? So this is why is the change needed? What are you fixing, or what are you jumping on in terms of opportunity? So it might be that you feel like at the moment the organisation is firefighting, there's constantly overspend with projects, there's a disconnect with how long things are going to take, how much things are going to cost, and it just feels chaotic. It feels like you can only just keep your head above water and you're just running on that treadmill and you're not actually getting anywhere. And it's not a nice place to be. So you want to fix that problem. You want to take control of change. You want to be proactive about the change and have a really proactive approach to how you manage that change in terms of projects and programs. Or it might be an opportunity. Your organisation might be on the cusp of growth, might be running really well at the moment. The operations are fantastic. But you know, in order to take the organisation to that next level, you need to set yourself a big vision. And to achieve that vision, there needs to be changes. And to make changes, you need projects, you need programs, and you need to make sure you deliver those projects and programs within time, within cost, to deliver the benefits and the scope that's needed, within the scope, to deliver the benefits that they need. So it could be an opportunity that you have. What does PMO therefore need to deliver you in terms of value? What does good look and feel like for every single stakeholder that will be interacting with the PMO? What are the outcomes and what outputs will deliver that? When you're really clear on what you're doing and why, now we need to shape it in terms of how long is it going to take? Who needs to be involved? How much is it going to cost? What are the risks and dependencies? So we talked about those pitfalls earlier. How are you going to avoid those pitfalls? If people already have an experience of PMO and it's been negative, how are you going to change their mind? And what are the ongoing costs of running the PMO versus the benefit? Now, you are going to have a lot of assumptions against your hows because you haven't created your operating model to change yet. So you don't yet know what the roles and responsibilities are and how many people you need to hire. So that's going to make it difficult when it comes to your costs. capture those as unknowns, as assumptions, and make sure you're clear on those assumptions. We are assuming we are going to need 6 people, and we're assuming it's going to cost us this much. You'll validate those assumptions later on. Capture what you know and what you don't know and what still needs to be validated. Now, we will be sharing after this on a link that we will send out to you, a business case template. So feel free to use that business case template if you are on the early journey, on the early stages of your journey of bringing in the PMO, to understand the need for change. Then we move into shaping. So this is designing the PMO. This is, what does the PMO need to look like in terms of its operating model? And we've got here 6 key pillars, 6 key focus areas in order to help you design that PMO. So what are the values and the principles of your PMO? What do you want it to stand for? Business driven, for example, right-sized governance, enabling but not policing, data-driven decision-making. So think about the values and principles for your PMO that will align to the nature and personality of your organisation. We implemented a PMO for a customer just over a year ago whose most important value was generosity. And they wanted their PMO to represent. Yes, Jen?
Sorry, Ruth, the slide hasn't moved on.
Can you not see the operating model?
Can now, yeah.
Oh, only just?
Only just, yeah, you just moved it on. Thank you.
What I will do is next time I move a slide, I'll just make sure you've seen it. Okay, so here, the 6 pillars are around the PMO, and the first one is values and principles. So what was I saying? That was it. We delivered a PMO for a customer whose most important value was generosity, and they wanted their PMO to reflect generosity. PMOs typically don't represent generosity, so we needed to make sure that was right at the core, and we've created really flexible and yet flexible processes that still had assurance and oversight across them, but brought in more contingency capability, etc. So values and principles, what truly matters to your organisation? What better reflects at the moment in terms of waterfall and agile, or do you want to go for a hybrid approach? A really good suggestion at this point is to tap into IT. You will probably find in most organisations that IT already has, even if it's not shared across the wider organisation, some sort of methodology when it comes to them rolling out their IT-related projects. So see what already exists and what they have. What works for them, what doesn't work for them? How can you utilise what is already there rather than reinventing the wheel? How can you integrate? Think about your people. What people might you need in order to deliver the processes and the method? Processes left-hand side, I'll touch on them in a moment. So for example, will you need a PMO director and a portfolio manager? PMO analysts that are both central within the PMO at portfolio level, but also frontline supporting projects and programs. Of course, you'll need your program and project managers and your governance and assurance leads. And then how are you going to align with finance and HR, for example, for your integration with those processes? And do you therefore need finance and people managers internally within the PMO, or utilise what's existing within the organisation? Think about your technology. So PPM, project portfolio management tools. Are you going to use one right now, or is that in the future? Will you utilise the existing MS suite? How will you use technology to communicate and engage? Processes. So your engagement and PR process, for example. This is really important. How are you going to get the value of the PMO out into the organisation? So it's not just a small team hidden away in the broom cupboard. It's actually there, central. Everybody knows about the PMO. If they've got an idea and they're excited about it and they want to bring that about as change, they know how to go to the PMO about it. When they do go to the PMO about it, the PMO are excited and they know how to look at that in terms of prioritisation versus the rest of the portfolio. How are you going to communicate from the beginning and maintain that throughout as a process so that everybody knows about the PMO? Your community of excellence. So this is all the processes, your project lifecycle, your program lifecycle. How do you manage, what are the processes involved in order to have effective portfolio management? What are the best practices within the PMO? And your community of practice, who are the people within the wider organisation that you want to pull together to create a community of practice, a community of champions that advocate for what you do, that have benefit and value from what you do, and how are you going to communicate and liaise with them, particularly if things change within the PMO. And finally, your templates. So, for example, and this is an almost endless list, and you'll see some of those when I take you through more detail shortly, but your planning template, your risk log, your status report, your business case, etc. There's many, many, many templates that you will have within the PMO. And of course, you will need some control over those templates. You will need to be able to effectively communicate them through the community of practice so that people can align with a community of excellence. There's a lot of information on that slide. Before I move on, has anybody got any questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I'm going to jump forward. Can you see that, Jen? Has it moved on? Fabulous. Okay, we're still in shaping your PMO. So let's start with the portfolio. This pyramid here, we shared this in our strategic change masterclass in January. So if you attended that, this will look really familiar. The role of the portfolio management office is to connect and keep that connection from projects and programs right up to vision. So how do you create the processes in place that have your vision up here, that aligns with strategy and strategic objectives, that understands the change, with your PMO sitting right there smack bang in the middle, overseeing your projects and programs, so that they are, your PMO needs to assure down and it needs to report upwards. In order to achieve that, there has to be a standard way of managing your projects and programs and reporting your projects and programs. You have to have a consistent life cycle, albeit you can do waterfall and agile. 100% you can be successful at both of those. You can take a hybrid approach because you can bring the reporting capability together. So it doesn't mean that you can only have one. You can absolutely have both, but there has to be consistency sitting under here. So when it comes to agile, there's one way of managing agile projects. There's one way of managing any waterfall projects. If a project or program uses both methodologies, they use both consistently, and then it reports up and it rolls up. So that what you can be left with is here on the left-hand side. Now, these are very small. You won't be able to see these in terms of zoomed in, but what you can see is visuals, and you can see where you immediately, if you work in change already, or even use any kind of RAG status within your roles, the reds jump out of you at you immediately. You know they need your attention. The greens, that's all right. We can leave them be. We know the greens are okay. And we can be confident that the PMO is doing due diligence, that they truly are green. And in the ambers, we know that there needs to be some focus on those because there might be some help needed. So what you then are aiming to create at portfolio level is rolling everything up. But you can only roll it up when you've got project and program capability sitting below you. So you've got these dashboards here. So for example, risks, which risks do we really want to zone in on? Well, we know we really want to zone in on these red risks right here. And here, when we're talking about progress, what's completed, what's not completed, what's delayed, we've got some red there. We know that's going to need some attention. We've got some amber there. We know that the whole project has turned amber, turned red. So what you're looking at for at portfolio level is the rolling up of everything at project and program, and then connecting it to a portfolio of change with strategy and strategic objectives, and ultimately your vision. So it's all around the KPIs, your OKRs. It's that reporting capability here. So translating your vision into strategic objectives that are tangible and trackable, understanding the change that will achieve those strategic objectives, when and how, and then the projects and programs and the benefits that are associated and the outcomes that are associated with those projects and programs that will connect the strategic objectives and ultimately the vision. So that on a monthly basis, a bi-monthly, a fortnightly, whatever it is agreed for your reporting cycle in your organisation, you are providing a dashboard at senior level to your decision makers on the strategic objectives, the KPIs, OKRs, however you're tracking them, where are we in progress of those? We said we'd achieve a strategic objective by the end of 2028. We're on track for that because X, Y, and Z project remain on track and they will deliver the outcomes that will achieve the benefits that will ultimately take us to achieving those strategic objectives. But in order to effectively have that portfolio management capability, we need to have it at project and program level. So I'm going to talk you through now an example life cycle that again is about making change simple. We're not overcomplicating this. We're making it simple at project level and at program level. And then after that, I'll talk you through the different processes and the different templates that sit within each of these as a minimum that will sit within each of these steps in order to achieve effective project management and effective program management. Because if you're effectively delivering projects and programs, you can report up in terms of progress to strategy. Bear in mind, of course, this is proactive. What you will get within your organisation is various reactive changes coming through. For example, you might fail a regulatory target that requires a change in order to get back on track. There might be a regulatory change. There might be, like we faced, well, God willing they won't, but like we faced with COVID, for example, resulted in a lot of change. So there will be reactive change coming in left field here, but you can effectively, through your prioritisation capability, understand where that fits and then map it into your portfolio so you can see where it impacts. Okay, project lifecycle at a high level. Understand, shape, deliver, embed. Understand the change. Before you even talk about the project and start shaping the project and planning the project, you must understand, first of all, the change that you're delivering. What needs to change and why? It's about envisaging the future, analysing where you currently are so that you can do that gap analysis. Where are we right now? Where do we need to be? And what's that gap from where we are versus where we need to be? And how will we bridge that gap? Once you can answer those questions, you're ready to move into the shaping of the project. You need to mobilise the team, determine who needs to be involved, and at what points do they need to be involved. And how will you deliver this project in order to achieve the change that you have articulated here? So this is when you start creating your project plan, for example. Then we move into delivery. This is when understand and shape come together and you deliver in alignment with everything you have said in those first two phases. And when you slip, because projects slip, you report that. And when those unknowns actually rise up to be an invalid assumption, for example, you can understand what that impact is at portfolio level. And then when you've delivered, you go live here, and then you move into embedding the change. Now, this is when often the PMO will step in rather than keeping a project manager on throughout embed. This is when you move into adopting change, establishing a new normal, creating lasting impacts that will really, truly realise the benefit. Ideally, your project manager stays right to the end, but often cost doesn't allow that. So having that capability within the PMO means that it doesn't just drop off and fall into the abyss. At programme level, very similar. However, once you've understood the change that the programme will deliver and you have shaped it, your delivery needs to adopt a project lifecycle within it in order to ensure all of your projects deliver effectively and don't lose oversight and assurance just because they're part of a larger programme lifecycle. So a very high level here, we're at programme level of understanding the change and shaping the change. But when you move into the delivery of the programme, you are shaping, delivering and embedding projects on a cyclical approach until you can move into embed overall at programme level. I will just caveat this with the fact that often programmes will have some sort of project delivery in the shape phase. And the reason for that is because it helps to get buy-in when you can deliver some tactical quick win projects. So often a programme that is 5 or 6 years long, for example, that is struggling to get buy-in will bring in some quick win projects whilst they're going through the shape phase as an almost kind of goodwill way of approaching the program, so that value can be realised quickly, more people get involved and engaged, and therefore when you get into the nuts and crannies of the delivery of the program, you've got that buy-in and support. The vast majority of the projects that sit within a program do sit within this deliver phase here. And then, of course, embed. And what we have running under both of these, the project lifecycle and the program lifecycle, is the golden thread of change. You must remain steadfast to the strategic objectives from beginning to end. How does this change our project, connect in and deliver a strategic objective? And from an air traffic control perspective, does it clash into anything else? Are we going to have a crash within the airspace because there is some duplicating priorities or some contradicting priorities? There might be a project to enhance a tool or a system, whereas a year later, there might be a project on the horizon to remove that tool or system altogether. So do we really want to spend money enhancing when we're about to remove it? Without the PMO, those two are not talking to each other, so wouldn't know. Now, before I get into the detail of the processes and templates that sit within the project lifecycle and the program lifecycle, has anybody got any questions? You. So understanding, shaping, deliver, and embed. This is a minimum value product, and therefore these are the things that we would not recommend you have a project lifecycle without having these elements in here. But if you're bringing in additional elements to this, ask yourself if they're truly needed, and they may well be. If you are delivering highly regulated change, for example, or you're working at a global level, then your PMO will need to be a lot more significantly bigger than what we're talking about here. Regulatory change, for example, anything within financial services, for example, a highly regulated industry needs to be more complex, particularly when it comes to customer impacts and when we talk about risk. But in terms of a general minimum value product, this is how to get your PMO up and running so that it starts to deliver value. Okay, understand. So governance, how are you going to govern your project? Now, this needs to be agreed at the beginning, but the shape of the governance will change. And at portfolio level, you need to have a standard for what that governance looks like. So all projects and all programs follow a particular governance life cycle, i.e., they must have a working group. They must report into a steering group. There must be a delivery assurance, for example, where all the projects come together at portfolio level. But at the beginning, you're only just understanding the project. So in terms of who's going to be involved in those meetings, it's going to be really small. But you need to start that governance from day one, particularly with whoever is your sponsor. Articulate your vision statement, your strategy visual, and any people impact. So understand and analyze where your people impacts lie. What is the project structure and the business case? Now, all of these are processes that you must consider within understand, but your business case ultimately is the final document, and we will share a template at the end of this that covers all of these elements. So I am just going to pause a second and go back to change portfolio, so our portfolio office, so that we can just reflect on the processes that need to sit within our portfolio office that ultimately enable our projects and programs, because they will all be held to these processes. So every single one of our projects and our programs within a portfolio will fall under these processes throughout their life. So reminding ourselves that this is ultimately the level that we are going from top to bottom. So we have our strategic objectives up here at the top, that is achieving visionary growth for an organisation. Sitting underneath that, we have the change that will achieve those strategic objectives, and the projects and programs that will ultimately realise those changes. The way that those projects and programs realise the change is through, and we'll go down to the bottom, the achievement or the delivery of requirements and acceptance criteria. those requirements and acceptance criteria, when delivered in line with plan, achieve deliverables and the success criteria that the project is hindered upon. They achieve particular outcomes which achieve project and program level objectives, and then going back up here, we achieve our programs and projects in order to realise the change. But the actual setting out of our portfolio and the designing of the projects and programs is the easy bit. It's when you get into delivery that we realise we come across various problems and challenges, because every project and every program will slip or come across challenge and problem at a certain point within its life cycle. So then we have these portfolio outputs, these portfolio processes that are absolutely vital to ensure you provide the relevant oversight assurance and to those projects and programs, and give them the confidence they need, and also our leadership team the confidence they need as well. So we've got the inventory itself, the portfolio itself. What are the projects and what are the programs that we have within our portfolio? And then a portfolio roadmap. So what are the critical milestones linking to when the outcomes and benefits will be realised and seen across the entire portfolio, so that we have a visual at any one point to see where all our projects and programs are sitting. And ideally, you want to try and automate that portfolio roadmap. Anybody that's worked within PMO before will have experienced that painful process of trying to get the tiny, tiny diagram of the tiny, tiny triangle or diamond that is tinier than your little fingernail, and move it across 3 millimeters to the right hand side, which takes it into another month. So if you can bring in an automation, it's significantly better. People requirements versus capacity tracker. So what people are needed in order to effectively deliver your projects and programs versus what capacity those people actually have. And if there's a gap, you then know how you're going to bridge that in terms of interim resource, contract resource, for example. Your financial forecast and financial tracking. The same for your benefits, but benefit forecasting and benefit tracking. Many financials and many benefits go way past project closure. So how does the portfolio management office keep track of those? Your portfolio RAID, so we've got your risks, assumptions, issues, dependencies, decisions, actions at portfolio level. Prioritization analysis. What are the most important projects and programs that you have? And when new projects and programs come on, how do you link those into portfolio analysis? Health checks. How do you keep a track of your projects and programs in terms of their performance? How are they aligning? You could have gateway checks, for example. Status report and performance dashboard. So how is the portfolio performing? Change management. How are people impacted by the change that we're delivering? And what are we going to do about that? How are we going to support through communications, engagement, training, etc.? How are we going to make sure we're listening to people through the testing phase to make sure what's being rolled out is absolutely fit for purpose? Change control, and of course, lessons learned repository. So when things do slip, because they will, how do we understand the impact of that? Reset expectations, and then understand learning to hopefully prevent other projects coming across the same challenge. And plan on a page, Stuart, we have that on portfolio roadmap. So that is a visual there. Any questions at all before I move back into project and program lifecycle? Feel free to take a screenshot if you like at this point. Oh, Liz?
Hiya, just wondering about defining the scope, so maybe that comes under success criteria. So to me, that's slightly different from requirements, because you kind of need to understand what your scope is. So you might have a project and you might that might be an MVP, and you kind of, that there'll be subsequent projects after that to deliver a full-on roadmap to achieve the strategy. So I don't see scope listed in there, but I think that's quite important, and that feeds into the change control process to make sure that actually what you're delivering aligns to that scope. We're not kind of going over and beyond what we set out to do as part of that project.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So scope is at project and program level. So when we move into that project life cycle and we're sort of starting to shape it, so shape the project, and you'll have seen that project triangle, won't you, where we've got cost, time, scope, the three critical elements. And of course, if you keep all of those aligned, then you deliver the outcomes, or you deliver the benefits that you're ultimately aiming to achieve. So scope itself, in terms of where it would sit within here, I think it spans over all three of the bottom outcomes. So it's mainly deliverables and success criteria, requirements and acceptance criteria. So what are the deliverables? What is this project delivering? Therefore, what is in scope of this project? And even if it is a minimum viable product, because there is another one coming along the track, the scope will still be restricted to that one particular project. But if we're talking at portfolio level, and there is an almost phase one with a phase two to come, they would either be one project of two phases, or they would be two projects under the portfolio itself. So you would have a project, sat here on the second line down, which would be phase one of what you've described there, and then you would have a following project. So phase one, the deliverables or the scope, when they deliver, you've achieved what you needed to do in terms of change. And then when it comes to the more permanent change, the one that we maybe would be phase two or part two, then the deliverables or the scope would reflect. Does that answer your question? Shout out if it doesn't.
We've got another question.
Another hand up there, Dominic.
Hiya. It may be is observation really, and it may be implicit in the portfolio roadmap element. But one of the things that I think the portfolio office can really play a role in is, as you mentioned, where projects or programs inevitably move to the right, what does that then mean in terms of the reshaping of the portfolio from a resource cost, even things like release management, in terms of, contentions in the IT space as things go through to live. So it might be implicit as part of that, but I think that's a genuine sort of overarching role that the portfolio office can play as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of the reasons we do like the air traffic control analogy, understanding the impact of anything that does slip. I think it falls into a number of these elements. As you say, you've got the portfolio roadmaps, you've got the visual of what that means, but just moving something along. If you're effectively managing your portfolio dependencies, then when something moves, the knock-on effect on other projects, for example, is known. If you're effectively communicating and engaging and that plan is maintained, you will know who needs to be communicated to and engaged with off the back of a move to the right change. So these are all elements that they're not really standalone processes, are they? They have to knit into one another, and they're all almost dependent. Many of them are dependent on one another as well. And what I would say as well is everybody has different terminology that they use within their organisation. As long as you don't move away from the principles, you can call things whatever you like. For example, outcomes and objectives can be quite a confusing term. Some people just call it benefits. Objectives could be goals. Deliverables and success criteria we could call that scope, because ultimately it's the scope and how do we know when we've achieved the elements that are sat within the scope. Well, it's your deliverables and your success criteria, but you could overarch scope over the top of that. So feel free to use the terminology that you want to use when it comes to implementing your PMO, that your organisation is more likely to understand. For example, portfolio radar, that's another acronym, isn't it, that we throw in there within PMO, but you might split it out of risks, portfolio assumptions, portfolio dependencies, etc.
I think that's a really good point, Ruth, because a lot of us here will have gone through Prince 2 training, it may have been through P3O foundation practitioner. There's a lot of complex terminology used in both those qualifications and courses. It really is about the language that works for you and your organisation, and remembering that those people who do work outside of PMO, they won't know those terms. So it really is important to get that language, that communication right. So you don't need to fit to Prince 2 terminology. You just need to make it work for you. Make the change simple for the people that are around you. Bringing the rest of the organisation on board, and not just being a change department in silo. I think it really does help.
Yeah, it'd be interesting actually if you do currently have some form of change function PMO, to do a bit of a survey in your organisation to see who understands different terminology. Because it's a language in its own right. So how can you make that language relatable? Any more questions on this slide? Let's move back to our project life cycle. So again, we're talking about the principles here rather than, so if there's a piece of terminology that you use that you're not seeing, as you have been doing, please flag it and we'll let you know where we feel that fits, because what we're doing here is talking about the principles rather than the dictionary of PMO. So understand your change, shape that change, deliver that change, embed it. So in terms of what we're focusing on when we're talking about understand, get your team together, start pulling together that governance structure and align into a governance structure. The PMO will need it, because when you fall into a governance structure, you fall into a reporting structure. You'll need to be doing that in order to be reporting into the portfolio, so the portfolio can ultimately be reporting up and shouting the good news about your project to those decision makers that are sitting over the top of the portfolio and owning the vision. Vision statement and the strategy and what impact this will have on people, again, very important and often is missed within projects, because what often happens is understand happens at an executive level or a leadership level. The need for change is understood there, and then a project manager is brought in to shape, deliver and embed. And this critical point of why do we need this change and who's impacted by it and how are we going to communicate that change to those impacted and make sure we deliver a change that is fit for purpose, they're on the ground delivering at the moment, that is missed because we jump straight into shaping, delivering and embedding. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, if you do not, social psychology tells us, if you do not understand why you need to make a change, are you really going to be bought into the actions and the change that is ultimately being brought in front of you? So you hear people all the time, they make significant life changes in terms of their health when they have a health scare, because suddenly it's right there in front of them. I need to make a change. I need to do something differently. And truly they already knew that, but it wasn't until that why was hugely in front of them and significant enough that it couldn't ignore it, that they made that change. And so understanding that change and creating the vision statement and the people, understanding the people analysis, and then moving into project structure is very important. And if you do anything at this stage, one deliverable that must be completed is the business case. And that business case should include everything. Ultimately, it's the why are we doing this from a cost and benefit analysis. But what else? Why? Will it be better for morale? Will it be nicer for people to work? But actually, how are we going to support people through the change? So you'll see that there is a template that we're very happy to share with you, and feel free to use that. It's editable, so you can add to it, take things away, etc. Okay, so once people are really excited about it, they know that they're on a burning platform and they need to get off and they need to jump into another space. They're ready for this change. They're ready to physically commit, emotionally, psychologically, etc. Then we can move into the shaping of the project. this is about mobilising that team, determine who needs to be involved, at what point they need to be involved, and how we're going to make this happen. So you're translating your business case into that cost benefit tracker that will go right through beyond embed and hand over into PMO. You're creating that project plan, a people impacts plan for the comms and engagement. You've got your radar, your risks, assumptions, issues, dependencies, decisions, and actions. And ideally you have them all on one tab, all on one tracker, sorry, but for different tabs, not all on one tab, different tabs for each of them. And you must review these on a regular basis. I don't think anybody loves sitting through and walking through their raid log, their risk log especially, but it needs to be done because otherwise you could miss important things. Keep it simple. Don't overdo your risk log. What could go wrong? If it goes wrong, what will happen? What are you going to do to control it? What's your progress? Who owns it? And when are you next going to look at it? With a rating of probability, impact, etc. So you can focus on the ones that are biggest, that are top and highest scoring first. But don't have numerous columns on your risk log, for example. Your dependencies, try to link your dependencies into a project plan. Again, some of the actions for those big risks, put them into the project plan so they don't get missed. But if there are dependencies that are outside of the project, they would be communicated up at portfolio level. So that, Dominic, as you clearly pointed out a moment ago, when a project or if a project moves to the right, if there are dependencies at portfolio level, that's clearly communicated. This is when we start creating the requirements and that acceptance criteria. And you will often do an initiation document, but you could call it anything within your organisation. But it's a summary of where is the project. Now we've taken it from business case. Now how are we going to take that business case and make it happen? It's a document that will get approved because we won't ask executives, for example, to approve a detailed line-by-line project plan. Your comms and engagement plan, which again needs to go all the way through. Then we move into delivery. All phase 2 outputs continue. They must move with you. They are trackable documents that are a version of their truth. They will tell you if things are off track. They are your standard for what you're delivering. So they must move with you into delivery. But now you're delivering everything that you said you would in shape. And towards the end of this, or might be doing it in phases throughout delivery, you will go through a go, no-go criteria. So you're starting to move that project into live. And it might be that you do that once, or it might be that it's a phased approach. You're understanding organisational readiness. You've got your technical readiness in there. And that will inform the decision to go live with the change that you have created. And creating an embed and sustain plan. So once this is into the BAU space, how do you make sure it's embedded and sustained as something that will absolutely deliver the values and the benefits that it was intended to do so? Then we move into embed. So we've delivered the project, it's launched, it's gone live, and there is usually a period, especially if it's technical, but we advocate this regardless of whether it's tech or not, of hypercare, of additional support. The project wrap around that change and wrap around those that are impacted by the change. And we'll often find that there are teething problems, things that need to be fixed. So it's a real period of support and find and fix as well. And then we move into embedding. So embed and sustain plan is delivered. Post-delivery analysis is completed. Let's look back at where we were versus where we are now. Is the new as is what we once described as being a future state? And the benefits realisation plan. And of course, because portfolio dictates it, there is change control sitting over this. There is lessons learned sitting across all of this. So everything is reported up in terms of learnings at that portfolio level. Lessons learned should be from beginning through to end, not an end state activity that you do. Anytime you go off track, lessons learned. Anytime you come from one phase and you're moving into the other, lessons learned. It needs to run all the way through. Now, I'm not going to go through program lifecycle in a huge amount of detail. It's very similar, except that understand and shape, as I talked about earlier, is at program level. But it must, when you move into the deliver phase, Whilst that remains at programme level for the programme manager who is overseeing it, there will be projects, or you may refer to them as work streams. We like to refer to them as projects within a programme. There will be projects that are being managed and must fall into their own project life cycle. If you do not go through a shape, deliver, embed phase for each of the projects or work streams within a programme, you will not give them the scrutiny that they need, and portfolio will miss out on some really key information which doesn't allow them to effectively report up at their programme, at portfolio level, in terms of how they link to strategic objectives and overall change. And Stuart, yes, what is not in scope? I've just noticed your question there. You're absolutely right. So you will see when we share our business case template, what is not in scope is as important as what is in scope, although cannot be an exhaustive list. But anything that you may assume people will think will be achieved within it. So for example, you might be delivering a project that is process-based but not tech-based. You would call out that the technical element is not in scope. When, for a programme, you are in that deliver phase of shape, deliver, embed, you have delivered all of your projects, they have all gone through a go live, then you would move into an embed phase at portfolio level as well. Sorry, at programme level as well. I'm just going to pause for a moment. Any questions at all on the project or programme life cycle? Tools and technology. Again, we're still in this shape phase. I am really conscious of time because we're nearly at 12:30, so I'm gonna just fly through this. Why does it matter? Why do we need a tool? Now, can you remember when we said there was 5 levels for a PMO, phase 4 and phase 5? The main change between moving from a phase 4 to a phase 5 is so your technology, your PPM tool, your portfolio, your project portfolio management tool brings in automation. It significantly brings significant efficiencies to your PMO and will really, really help. But be wary when you bring in your tech. Either bring it in very clearly on the roadmap of your PMO development as a phased approach, unless you're doing the big bang, in which case it's all out. However, a PPM tool is, again, a project in its own right, and it's very easy to get sucked into a sales pitch from PPM tool providers, and you end up buying into something that is all singing and all dancing when actually what you need is really high level. So just be really cautious about how much you go into when it comes to tool and tech. Be very, very clear on what your requirements are for the technology and what you don't need. So when we talk about in scope, out of scope, be clear on what you need for that tech. Choose something that will connect at project, program and portfolio level, that is automated and reduces manual effort, that is intuitive and uses dashboard reporting. Choose something that aligns with your methodology as well. Ideally opt for something that is hybrid, that can do both, because it gives you that ability to scale up if you want to. And with that in mind, choose a tool that you can start small and then scale up with. And consider training and adoption. Do not roll it out without training and adoption, because a tool is only as good as the information that is going into it and the people that are using it. And we've got some here just as an example. KeyView is that they do the Perform tool. We're affiliated with them. We're one of KeyView's partners. So we do advocate for this. But that said, all of these tools we have worked with, many, many more. And as long as it's implemented right, in line with requirements, and training and comms is effective, you can utilize any PPM tool for what you need, as long as it's aligned to your methodology as well. But there's a few there that you can utilize. PlanView, Smartsheet. Smartsheet's really good, especially if you use Excel at the moment and you want to bring efficiencies in without changing ways of working too much. Okay, recruit into the PMO. What people do you need to effectively deliver the process? When you're in the deliver phase of your PMO build, Look back at the people you thought you might need. Look at the processes and the new operating model that you have designed. Is this in line with what you thought, or do you yourself need to go through a change request? Think about what capabilities you need to engage on interim support when needed. So how, when you've got that actual versus forecast of people and resource, how will you bridge that gap when there is one? Create clear role profiles with development plans. People want to see how they can develop within their PMO. And offer opportunities to existing colleagues if possible, especially if the PMO is brand new. Try to bring in some colleagues within the organisation, not at the senior level. Senior level, you need to recruit with experience, but PMO analyst level, for example, try to bring people in, train them up and give them those experiences and opportunities. And then decide if you're going to go through a phased or big bang approach and recruit in line with that. You may not need your full team from day one. And I mentioned at the beginning about a phased approach or a big bang approach. You will need to decide which route you're going to go down when you create the business case for the build of your PMO. Are you doing a phased approach, i.e. project first, then program, then portfolio, then we're going to bring in a tool? Or are you doing the whole thing, big bang? We're going to design it all with the processes, get the people, get the technology, and then we're going to roll it all out together. Only you will know what the right approach is for your organisation. Some organisations prefer everything all in one go. Others would prefer a more controlled kind of phased, a lighter approach. I would absolutely caveat this though. If you go with a phased approach, be clear on when the value will be realised at leadership executive level, because they don't start to see the value until your portfolio capability comes in. And if you get stuck at tactical, at project and program, your PMO will be labelled with those negative connotations. So move to portfolio as quickly as possible. Pre-go live. As any project, communicate your launch date in advance. Be very clear when you're going live. Test what you've created with a pilot group for accuracy, feedback and social proof. Plan a pragmatic approach for in-flight projects to avoid surprises that will hinder project delivery. How can you be pragmatic about it being a moving forward rather than necessarily a backward kind of retrofitting? Deliver your training and your upskilling and be clear on what your go live criteria is to ensure you're ready to go live with your PMO, regardless of whether it's phased or big bang. Have a team on hand to transition projects and provide support. Keep the training going. Implement immediately a feedback model with quick win capability and communicate. That is essential. Once you've gone live, transfer that training into BAU as part of upskilling and induction. Track your benefits so that you can start reporting the value of your PMO and implement a feedback model. Here's a quick view of what a feedback model could be. A quarterly feedback model where you are asking your project managers and stakeholders, how can you change within the PMO? What can you do differently? So there's a capability for submitting feedback, or you'll capture it through lessons learned. You'll do a quarterly review. PMOs review all submitted feedback quarterly. You prioritise and agree what needs to change, and you implement it the following quarter. Then you implement agreed changes, notify the change community of anything that's coming up in the following quarter because you've received new feedback. And then you make the changes, you agree them, and you deliver them. And of course, once those changes have been made, you conduct a drop-in sessions to explain the changes and provide support and feedback. Capture any feedback from rollout for continuous improvement. So it's just kind of that ongoing cycle of change. We're hearing what you're saying. We're going to make these changes. We've made the changes. Now we're going to roll it out. We're listening to what you're saying. We're going to make the changes. We've made them. We're rolling it out. And it's an ongoing cycle. Feel free if you need to. We are at time. However, because we are recording this session, if you'd like to drop off because you have other commitments, feel free to do so. Anybody that's attended today, we will share a recording of today's webinar, so you can catch up on the last few minutes of anything that you have missed. But we are nearly there. Remember, when you're delivering any type of change, particularly bringing in a new function and a new way of working, you will face resistance to that change, but keep going. People resist what they don't understand, but the proof is in the pudding. And if you've got some quick wins that you can get out there to demonstrate value, you'll start to see that resistance fade. Leadership buy-in takes time. Be patient and be persistent. At the beginning, we talked about how important that leadership buy-in is. Don't give up. Keep going. If you know it's valuable for your organisation, keep going until you've got that leadership buy-in. And if there's anything you can do to get those quick wins in, for example, if you're a project manager or you work in change and transformation and you don't have a PMO, but know you would like to have a PMO, just keep working at it. If you're struggling to get people to follow the governance and you've rolled it out and people are just not aligning, consider if things need to be simplified. Is there any unnecessary admin? Is it still being seen as a burden? Get that feedback. Utilize the feedback model to see what people are feeling and hearing. If you've not got resources and tools in place yet, work with what you have. It's a big investment to get your PPM tool in place. It costs a lot of money and it takes time. If that feels like too big of a commitment for the organisation, just work with what you have now. MS Suite can work absolutely fine to run the PMO, particularly when you first get started. And if you're facing pushback, be that bridge between strategy and delivery, because that is the role of the portfolio management office, and start demonstrating value where you're communicating to leadership, you're communicating to your project and program managers. Be that gap, keep that communication flowing, and be the vital middle person in the middle of that pyramid diagram that we showed you earlier. And progress at times could feel slow. It's a big change, it's a new way of working, and people may struggle with it. So celebrate those big wins. How can prospect change help? That does bring us to the end, but before I go into this, we've got a few still on the call. Has anybody got any questions at all? We will continue. So at Prospect Change, we have 3 services, all of which specialise in PMO. We have our PMO as a service, where we create, enhance, or recover PMOs at portfolio, programme, or project level. We tend to do a lot in the programme space because a lot of organisations don't have programme capability, only project capability. So we will come in and create a programme lifecycle that is bespoke to that organisation and rescue a programme when it is struggling. And then create or enhance portfolios is the other big area of focus that we have. We do quite a lot for our customers as well in that space. And then PMO Partner. PMO Partner is a retainer service, and this is to help bridge that gap. If somebody is working within PMO, leading as a director, a head of, or a manager of a PMO, and they're running the operational side of the PMO, as well as trying to enhance and grow the capability of the PMO, that is an incredibly difficult position to be in, because you're ultimately doing 2 jobs. So we can come in and be that extra pair of hands for the portfolio management office and for that leader or manager of the PMO, so that we can do what they would love to do but don't have time to do, and make those changes on their behalf and hand it over to them for them to roll out and communicate to the organisation. People also use our PMO Partner service for troubleshooting and for workshops, for lessons learned, for facilitating with go-no-go criteria, for example, and helping to get a go decision for a project or a programme. So that starts as little as 1 day a month. And then training. So we offer a lot of training at programme, project and PMO level as well, in a way that is bespoke and fit for purpose for the organisation that needs it. So we create a bespoke training package at any of those levels, and then deliver training to upskill. This is particularly useful if a new PMO has been set up, or an existing PMO is being enhanced, and they want to provide those development opportunities internally. Then we can come in and deliver some training to those new starters within the team to get them up and running. And that pretty much brings us to the end of today. Before I ask if there's any questions, I will just let you know about the freebies that we are going to be sharing with you after this workshop. So they'll come out probably on Monday to you. We're going to share with you a chat mat, a PMO chat mat, which is all about the value of a PMO. So anybody that's engaging with a PMO, what does that look, feel like? What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What are they feeling as a result of a PMO being present? It's a really useful tool for you to use to get that PMO buy-in. The PMO blueprint. So we'll provide with you a high-level blueprint for bringing about a PMO within your organisation. We'll share with you a very simple project workbook. It's one of my favourite templates and an incredibly simple one. It has everything you need at that high level for a project in one place, and is especially good for new or inexperienced project managers that find themselves managing projects. And of course, the business case template that I've mentioned a couple of times as well. And our next session is the 13th of March. I have touched on this. We're talking about the difference between agile and waterfall PMOs. And events will be delivered monthly throughout 2025, all relating to PMO projects, change and strategy. That does bring us to the end of today. Thank you so much for joining us. And before we close out, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, we do have one. I think, Asha, you were referring to the same one?
Yeah. Tass asked the question, is there any recommendations for a resource management tool?
A resource management tool? It's a really good question. Honestly, I would use PPM for that. The vast majority of PPM tools have resource capability within them. And if you're going to invest in a tool for projects specifically for resource, I would recommend investing in a PPM tool itself, because then you can connect your resource capability or your resource availability versus capacity to your plans. You can connect it to dependencies, and rather than it just telling you a story about your resources, when your plan pushes out, for example, it shows you the impact on your resources. When dependencies are impacted and they impact resource, it communicates that to you as well. So I would consider a PPM tool. There were a few on that slide that I showed, PlanView, Microsoft, Smartsheet and KeyView Perform tool, but there's many more out in the industry. But Smartsheet would be a good starting point, I think, for you to go granular enough to be managing resources.